Let me tell you a tale about cannabis. And it's going to be a long one. 135 chapters, in fact. And it starts with some hubris. I had been a drug writer for 10 years or so, in New York mostly, writing about the intersection between the neurochemistry of how these drugs worked and then how they were actually being used out in the real world by people. And people started asking, when are you going to write a book? You know, a book, you got to have a book. And so I decided I would do my first book on cannabis because how hard could it be? You know, year or two, have it done, bing, bang, bam, I got a book. There was my great hubris. At that point, I didn't know who Jack Herrera was, I didn't know about the long human history of cannabis, and I didn't even know about anandamide, the first endocannabinoid neurotransmitter. I started calling that my great white whale. And so after 5 years, I had so much research that I didn't know how to get it all into one form, especially because for most topics, someone else had already written a great book about it. The only thing that hadn't been done in depth was the complexities of the endocannabinoid system. That's what I wanted to share to people. But it's a very complicated thing to explain that much neurochemistry. So on my last research trip around mostly the Pacific Northwest, I had a big long drive. I took Moby Dick as my one big fat book to read, like I always do, because I've been talking about my great white whale. And readers, I fell in love. I was agog. In a lifetime of reading, I had never experienced falling for a book like that. And by the first third, I knew not only did I love this book, but that this was the perfect structure for what I was trying to say. Because the whales would be the cannabinoids and all of their mysterious beauty. But Captain Ahab would be prohibition and the vicious pushback against it from Harry Anslinger through Nixon, through Obama, and onward. And so it seemed so clear this was the structure. And I finished reading the book on the trip and loved it so much. And then once I got back to New York, I read Moby Dick again immediately. And on each red post-it note for each chapter, I would write what happened in that chapter and maybe a little bit about how that would relate to my book. And then I would put cards underneath explaining what I would explain there. And the more I worked on it, the more the ocean itself lined up to the human brain, and the more the rise and flow of Moby Dick was perfect with the human story of cannabis. And I had found my structure. And so now I will do the outline has changed now that I've actually started writing books, but this first outline still gives a great idea of the human story and the science. So I'll go through each of these with you for the next 135 weeks or however long it takes. And so chapter 1 is Loomings. And it is, in Moby Dick, sailors traveling the ocean to hunt the whales, while my book will be scientists exploring the brain and body to elucidate the cannabinoids. So come with me for a voyage.